NFL Week 13. I'm here with Ron. I'm Cris, and we are going to talk Week 12. We're going to talk Week 13. We're going to talk probably some divisional situations, some playoff situations, some coaching situations, and viewer questions and answers, or attempted answers. And where do we start, Ron? How was your weekend?
Well, it's been a recurring theme in the college. It was just a really good weekend, especially for the top plays in the college, but floundered a little in the NFL. And on Sunday night, Monday morning, I was kind of beating myself up for some of the plays that I made. And in looking back later on yesterday and today, I'm not going to beat myself up as much on these particular plays that I made. We can go over them. I can tell you what I did. I don't know that I have any regrets. I just don't think it was a strong weekend overall.
So you're not going to be wearing those jeans that had those no regret signatures on the back pockets?
No, I mean, my first reaction was, why did I do this? Why did I do this? I stumbled into a bad week. And my second reaction was, it really wasn't that bad. I play generally 3 underdogs to 1 favorite. We know that favorites dominated this past week, and yet it wasn't too bad. 2 and 3 for the straight plays. It felt a lot worse because it was 1 and 3 on Sunday. The Thursday I had Green Bay against Detroit to start off 1-0, and I also had the over in that game. But when it came to Sunday, just Sunday alone, 1 and 3 doesn't feel that good.
Well, my run of NCAA winning weeks went down the drain. Started off the first day or two very well, and then what hit? I guess Friday was bad, Saturday was bad. Then Sunday NFL. I don't even know how. I haven't even told you. This was so bad. The model, which had been doing well the previous couple of weeks, laid a big turd. And I remember looking at the lineup last week and I just said, boy, I have a lot of toss-up games. I really have to. I just don't want to bet these straight. So I actually set up almost every game I played was on teasers, Saturday and Sunday, or Sunday and Monday. And the straight bets, the early games, 0-5. Complete 0-5. Teased, 4-1. So if I averted a colossal disaster. Lost the 6th game in a row with Cleveland, and that teaser lost as well, so that was no good. But finished well because Baltimore covered, and I teased Minnesota and middled the hell out of that. So I lost a little bit, but I should have lost a ton. And the thing about it is even it's funny how the model can be really good for a couple of weeks, and it can just be bad one week, and then it could be really good this week. Do you find that to be true with what goes on with your process, or is it a little bit streakier than that and kind of a gradual up and down?
My process is usually not streaky at all. There are ebbs and flows week to week this year you could say based on the fact that some teams have quarterbacks and some do not. Just to reiterate, there are 3 methods I use for handicapping. One of them is power ratings. The other one is in-game matchups, the metric analysis, and the other one is any situational factors. And the power ratings are a little harder to do when you have quarterbacks with such a small sample size. So I have to suspend power rankings, or I just can't use them completely. Unfortunately, in about 4 or 5 games last week because of the quarterback matchups. So, Cris, that's really the only way that it gets skewed, is that I can't put complete trust in one of my facets of handicapping when you've got so many players at a key position that just do not have enough sample size.
I saw a stat that says that we're not going through quarterbacks any faster than we have been in the past. It doesn't seem that way, though, does it?
Uh, that stat is true. I think I told you offline, we talk about 55 to 60 different quarterback starts every year. The problem is the drop off between starting quarterback and backup quarterback is what's pronounced. We have never seen so many inexperienced rookies or just flat out bad backups start games this year. I think there's no difference in the number of quarterbacks starting, but there's just a huge difference in the quality of the backup.
Going back to Thanksgiving Day, it was extremely disappointing to see how poorly the Lions played. It's clear that there's some problems there. Goff has been a complete disaster for several games. I think he had 5 turnovers in 5 quarters. The defense is not doing well. They're not getting any sacks. They're not getting enough pressure. And what was really bad, I don't know whether you noted this or not, the offensive line, regarded as the best in football, got dominated. Green Bay dominated them last week. And just not a lot of, cracks on the armor. Campbell going for it on 4th and 6, around his own 25-yard line needlessly. With 10 minutes to go, it just seemed like they're certainly not an elite team, and cause for concern on my end.
Yeah, as you know, last week I had this column blank here, this matchup analysis. I wasn't ready on Tuesday, but once I did the matchup analysis for that game, I said, wait a second, there's not that much difference in these two teams as they match up against one another. Green Bay with a very strong underdog situation and so on. I was concerned, well, obviously taking the Packers, I was concerned about the Lions in that particular spot. And turnovers certainly didn't help. Going for it in their own territory, they panicked a little bit. They're still good enough to be, I think, 8th in my ratings, but there's a big drop between the top 7 and the 8th team, which is them. So they're still in the top 10 primarily because I don't know if you could, I mean, there aren't it's not a really good top 10. I actually have them a little bit ahead of Jacksonville. I don't know where you have Jacksonville in your ratings. So Detroit is still a fine team. I still project them to win that division. But the matchup analysis really liked the points in Green Bay in that game.
Yeah, well, you know what? I kind of did think the Lions would, off that Chicago game would be kind of putting them away, come on strong early. And it just was the complete and utter opposite. I didn't have any Lions on the spread, but I had them in the teasers. And that's not the way you want to start off the week. But
No.
the other 2 games went my way. I had Dallas and 10-point teasers. Dallas did what they were supposed to do. Washington actually didn't put up much of a fight, which kind of surprised me a little bit. It seems evident that there'll be a complete overhaul at the end of the season. Wouldn't you agree?
I think they tipped their hand when right before the trading deadline, they dumped 2 of their best players on defense. Now they've dumped their defensive coordinator. They're going to be a completely different team. They're going to rebuild from scratch. Washington's one of those teams you really want to stay away from. They're going to look attractive again with the point spread because it's going to be hard to power rate them correctly. But the lack of effort, the lack of personnel that they have right now, and the lack of direction, no part of that game. And San Francisco, Seattle, you've heard me mention many times, I don't like to get in front of a moving freight train. And right now, San Francisco is that moving freight train. When they're healthy, they're the number 1 team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I was surprised that Seattle put up very little fight, and it didn't look like they were ever in this game. And that was very surprising. I did have San Francisco blanketed, but I still had a concern that Seattle would keep it close, and they didn't. The Seattle will not make the playoffs that we made a couple of weeks ago. I noticed today. Let's see. Oh, kind of surprising because the Rams have won 2 games in a row. Seattle's lost 2 games in a row and plays Buffalo, San Francisco, and somebody else good.
Yeah, they're in the middle of a gauntlet part of the
they've played
schedule.
3 in a row. Philly, I think it is. So now the Seahawks are actually, the no is minus 125 now on the Seahawks. It was
you want to get ahead of the curve on those kinds of things, and that's why we have these discussions. We could always pivot back after another loss or 2, depending on what their competitors do. There's no such thing as Green Bay automatically jumping ahead of them, even the Rams jumping ahead of them just because they beat Arizona at Arizona. The race is still up for grabs, but the value with Seattle heading into the meat of their schedule, with Seattle having an offensive line that has not been healthy, even since day one, that offensive line has not been healthy. And when you have cluster injuries to one area, defensive secondary, offensive line, that's pretty serious for a team to overcome. And Geno Smith, he doesn't have the quarterback profile to overcome a substandard offensive line.
Well, we took the Rams to make the playoffs, like plus 895, and they're down to plus 235.
Yeah.
So 2-1's trending in the right direction, but our Vikings, which was looking very good, they've lost 2 in a row, and now we can get a better price on them. So we can't pat ourselves on the back on that one quite yet, although they're still in the thick of it.
I still fully expect them to make the playoffs. We're talking about turnovers again with Minnesota. They've lost 4 of their games. They've lost with a -3 or greater turnover ratio. Maybe one of them was -2. You just can't keep turning the ball over. And for all the accolades everybody was throwing on Joshua Dobbs, how great he's doing this and this and this, he only ran the ball twice last night against Chicago, and that's his strength. His weakness is he's not an NFL starting quarterback, and we shouldn't elevate him to that status. He throws a lot of interceptions, typically not as many as last night, which were 4. But Dobbs, he just has to be a game manager because they have played better defense, Minnesota, and they have enough playmakers that if you don't force things, they're going to be in a lot of different games. So I still think Minnesota will get the number 6 seed in the NFC.
I think they will, but I was appalled at how poorly they played last night. I guess since there's no Minnesota game to talk about for this coming week, might as well finish the topic. I just can't believe they wouldn't let this guy throw down the middle, and his interceptions, they weren't really his fault. They kept bouncing out of the receiver's hands. It was kind of unfortunate, but they just kept giving him the same plays. And I'm starting to think the Lions made the right move getting rid of Hawkinson, because he, first off, he should know better than to run a route short of the first down marker, which he did on 3rd down. Dobbs had the ball thrown a little bit high because he expected him to be, farther along, and he ran the route short. And a guy his size is able to just bring him right down. And that happened 2 or 3 times last night where guys one-on-one are able to bring him down. And a tight end shouldn't be able to be so easily brought down. I don't know whether you've noticed that in his game.
I'm not going to be so critical in that respect. I mean, what did he do? Score 2 touchdowns? No, just 1 touch. Did he have just 1 touchdown in that game?
Well, there was only 1 touchdown in the game.
Yeah, in the whole game. That's right. I'm not going to dwell on that. I think Dobbs gets the ball out sometimes a tad late. Even the announcers picked up on the fact that he didn't lead the wide receivers in patterns. He kind of threw slightly behind the wide receivers. Point I just made to Birdie is that when Justin Jefferson comes back, the coverage is going to be easier for Jordan Addison, and it's going to be easier on Hawkinson as well. So things will loosen up a little when you get your stud wide receiver back. Right now, it's a little bit too easy to cover Minnesota because they're missing their number one weapon.
Yeah, and they did announce he's probable for the next game. And I'm not saying Hawkinson is garbage by any means, but for a tight end, it just seems like I've seen him brought down too easily one-on-one, and you don't see that too often with tight ends. So just an observation I made last night. Dolphins and Jets. Dolphins took care of business, and the Jets can't score. Are they ever going to score?
Well, it's another fantastic stay away game. Another one where, how do I put a power rating on the Jets? Here's the answer, Chris. I didn't even try. I said, whatever the Jets do, I don't really care. They're at home. The Jet fans don't really care. It's kind of a lost season. Maybe if they would have snuck up and beat Miami, they would have had false hopes because of their record. But it's really not a good situation right now for them. Talking about offensive line problems, they don't really have an offensive line that protects. The biggest takeaway from that game, and I wrote about this in the article for Wager Talk that should be out today, the Jets have virtually nothing at quarterback, yet they ran the ball. How many times did they run the ball, Chris, last Friday? The answer is 10. 10 rush attempts. You cannot win the NFL if you're hoping that their quarterback is going to drop back 45 times, of which he threw 38 passes and got sacked the other 7 times. Just absolute poor game planning. I know Sean Payton didn't like Hackett as the offensive coordinator. They made some remarks at the beginning of the season, and there was some back and forth trash talk and stuff like that. But the bottom line is, without Aaron Rodgers there, the Jets are being exposed for having a defensive-minded coach and not much of an offensive rhythm. And it's going to be a rebuild along the offensive line for them in the offseason. Miami, they just need to stay healthy. They have a chance, a really great opportunity to host a playoff game, maybe even host 2 playoff games if things go well. But there's really no use in backing the Jets much the rest of the year, except for in a look-ahead road situation.
Well, Miami was the number 1 seed briefly after that game. I ended up throwing him in some 3-team teasers. Something makes me uneasy about Miami for some reason, but they show up. They've been winning. Jaguars and Texans, pretty much kind of how I expected it. I said I had a funny feeling there's something wrong with that line, and it had Jacksonville written all over it. Fortunately, they covered the teaser, so I was okay on that. But Stroud, he's had a couple of mediocre games in a row now, right?
Yeah, well, there's 2 factors going on. Number one, every week we get more game tape. 3 factors. Every week we get more game tape on them. Number 2, even though they ran well at times last week, they're generally a below average running team, forcing him to do too much. And number 3, there's going to be some fatigue on Stroud's part. They played 12 games in the college season. Because it's Ohio State, they tend to play 13, sometimes 14 games, because if they're in the playoff mix, if they play in the Big Ten championship and stuff like that. But I think last year they only played 13 games. So now this is game 12, 13, plus he had the preseason and all, and everything's just hitting him all at once. There's going to be some fatigue for these rookies. We put him on a pedestal. He's having just a dynamite year. And even if he looks average the rest of the year, it's more than most people would have thought. So I have no problems with his performance. If Houston still has a chance to make the playoffs, that doesn't go away just because they lost a game against Jacksonville.
What? The Jacksonville just does not seem to be a top 7 or 8 team in the league to me for some reason. Are they there by default, or do they belong there?
Now, and there are reasons why they're number 9, why they're one notch below Detroit for me. And I mentioned that at the top of the show. Jacksonville wants to be considered an elite team, but through enormous general manager mistakes, they don't have enough talent and enough depth when you compare them to the San Franciscos, the Philadelphias, the Kansas Cities of the world. Baltimore, too. Those 4 teams were built by the draft and built by a lot of different metrics that made it next man up unless they lose their quarterback. There's so much depth on those teams, and Jacksonville doesn't have that. Jacksonville has injuries to the offensive line. I think left tackle Cam Robinson is down now. They have a fine wide receiver core. They have some talent throughout the defense, but not enough of it, and it's not a complete starting unit. I think they're well positioned within their division, and you never know what can happen in the playoffs. You string a couple of games together, but they, by power rating wise and by talent wise, they are not a top 7 team.
So they unceremoniously dumped their field goal kicker after he dinged that game-tying field goal. That was kind of abrupt, wasn't it?
They are going to re-sign him. I think they cleared a roster spot.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a 58 or 59 yarder. It was kind of a weird move, but the NFL does some weird things in order to get rosters under control.
Yeah, the Lions have dumped some players and just signed them right back a handful of times. Tampa Bay, Indianapolis, I expected a little bit better from Tampa Bay. I know Baker got dinged up in the middle of the game for a period of time. Taylor had a great job. And speaking of Taylor, he's got a thumb injury and it appears highly questionable at this point to play this week.
It was interesting just when he was getting going. But remember, Moss, before Taylor was cleared medically to come back, Moss had something like 6 or 7 yards per carry in 2 consecutive games. Moss has proven to be a valuable asset to have in the backfield. That the loss of Taylor is at most a half a point. It may not even be a half a point on my numbers. Running backs, interchangeable running backs, won't move the needle much for me. It's a loss to the public, and it's a loss because Taylor, when he's completely healthy, is one of the 5 best running backs in the league. But that's the reason why they have Moss on the team, and it's a good move by Indianapolis, who has a really, really easy schedule down the stretch.
What do you think about Minshew? Have you been studying any of the quarterback data over the recent weeks? It seems like he's not getting any better. He's kind of slipping.
Yeah, it's funny that Tampa played Indianapolis because Minshew and Baker Mayfield are very similar quarterbacks for me in terms of profile. Baker Mayfield will not turn the ball over as much, and maybe Baker has slightly more of a linebacker mentality, but they're both pretty tough. They're both gritty. They're both low-level starting quarterbacks in the NFL. You could do better than Baker Mayfield. You can do better than Gardner Minshew, but either one of them is good enough to get you competitive in any game they play. I pretty much know what to expect with Minshew week in and week out, and he's got to have other facets of the team delivering for him to deliver the win.
Yeah, he's not going to carry them. As the week went on, I became a Patriots backer. I actually teased them plus the 3.5, and I ended up winning. But boy, what a shit show that was! A pathetic display.
Yeah. Well, that was one of my losses. That was one of my losses, and the only reason it was a deserved loss is because New England just doesn't care. I mean, New England is they're clearly in the best situation they could possibly be in against the New York Giants, playing a quarterback that Bill Belichick should handle, without any problem. And what do they go ahead and do? Where they commit three turnovers in New York Giant territory and then play like a 30-something yard field goal is an automatic. They stop even trying to move the ball the last minute, trying to settle for a game-tying field goal to push it into overtime. And they got what they deserved, and I got what I deserved too. New England's a better team. They would win and cover that game 7 out of 10 times. Yet I don't think it's an undeserved loss because this is New England, and you get what you pay for.
Do you think coaching change matters here in Carolina? Once again, it's becoming a yearly event.
No, I think they're kind of lost right now. There's a lot of infighting about should they have drafted Bryce Young, should they not, and all that. And I don't want to really get into that. I think there were certainly camps that believed that Bryce Young was the better quarterback. And Young and Stroud, to me, were neck and neck. They were the only two quarterbacks I would have definitely drafted in the top 10. The only problem I have with Bryce Young is he's awfully small. If you really look at him, he has less size to me than Kyler Murray does. And Murray's been banged up a couple of times up with Arizona. So I'm really concerned. My biggest issue with Carolina is they're going to be out of draft picks for 2024 and 2025. They gave away so much to the Chicago Bears that they're going to have to rely on making Jacksonville type moves in free agency. Jacksonville's a terrible drafting team, but they dominated free agency 2 years ago. That's what Carolina has to do to rebuild this team. I don't see an interim coach bump with Carolina.
Well, Pittsburgh slid by Cincinnati. Cincinnati covered a teaser leg. Pittsburgh covered the regular leg. Their offense, under this new offensive coordinator, every single game, they've gone over 400 yards. It's a pretty remarkable turnaround. What do you think?
Well, I think what happened is the players felt better with the new coordinator, and they were all out to perform a little bit better, but they still didn't convert in the red zone. 16 points is 16 points. But I'm going to say it again. Any team with a healthy TJ Watt is good enough for me. And you saw how he impacted that game against Cincinnati. I mean, he was a one-man wrecking crew at times. They don't even have Micah Fitzpatrick back in the secondary yet. He's been missing 4 or 5 games. These are playmakers. And Pittsburgh's defense, it seems to be forgotten how good Pittsburgh's defense is and how it keeps them in games. So if the offense gets rolling, you could see them as high as the number 5 seed. The way they're going now, the margin for victory is not. If they do not play their A or B game, they're still susceptible to losing any game on their schedule. But when they play their A or B game, even with the offensive woes that they've had, they're a candidate to go 10-7.
Were you aware of how many games in a row Pittsburgh had gone without hitting 400 yards?
I was not aware of that stat, but yards are one thing. I concentrate on points, red zone opportunities, what happens in the kicking game. Are they missing kicks and stuff like that? Yards as a statistic, it's not one of my favorite stats.
58 games.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
You think the Bengals, where do they go from here? They've got nothing to play for at this point.
0-4 in division, so they're done.
Yeah. The Saints Falcons. Boy, that's a problem. They're talking about bringing in the backup, sitting Carr.
Yeah. When those two teams play, just take the dog, and that was my one success on Sunday, saying that who died and made New Orleans a road favorite. Because I just don't like Dennis Allen. I mean, if you want to talk about coaches and their impact, I just don't like him. That team is better than Atlanta. They're better than Carolina. They're not necessarily better than Tampa Bay's experienced players, but they're deeper than Tampa Bay overall. And, they just continue to do some weird things. Lattimore is out. He's on IR, I believe. That's a key position because defense, much like Pittsburgh, has kept them in a lot of games. But, and they could still win the division because Atlanta is a run-first team that really doesn't understand today's football. They rely on a very, very good rookie running back and Bijan Robinson. But they're not relying on a lot of other things. Desmond Ridder comes back, throws 2 interceptions. Yeah, I think it's musical chairs at the top of that division. New Orleans, Atlanta, Tampa. Just put them in a hat and see which one comes out on top.
Well, Atlanta's 3-0 in the division. They've got a nice advantage there. I think the Saints, when they're healthy, are by far the best team in that division, but the coaching is horrible. I needed a field goal. That was the only team that didn't cover a teaser leg early. They've got like 4th and long with less than a minute to go. And instead of kicking the field goal down 9 like you're supposed to, they went for it and obviously choked, and that was frustrating. I know you like Dennis Allen as a coach, and now I love him too.
Yeah. Well, I do like him because he earns me money.
I was surprised that Arizona, after the first quarter, seemed to just be a complete and utter no-show. And I'm curious what your thought is coming into this week. They go on the bye next week, so it's their last game. Are they just running out of gas, or are they going to show some pride and come out hard this week? Did they quit last week? How did they lose by so much?
Okay, 2 things. First, the overriding problem in Arizona is talent. They do not have enough defensive talent, and every week in the second half, they're not able to make adjustments, or they get caught because other teams are saying, oh, it's close, we're behind, we've got to put the pedal to the metal, and they take advantage of a lack of talent, especially defensively for Arizona. The other thing is the Rams just have Arizona's number. They're 7-0 straight up and against the spread at Arizona. And as much as when the line kept creeping up, I wanted to take Arizona, I was aware of the fact that the Rams just play well there. And I just said, you know something, don't be foolish now. You're not going to chase anything. There's nothing there for you. Leave it alone. Arizona, you're going to regret it if you take Arizona because they're just not a complete team. I still think they're trying. I think like Carolina, those 2 rosters are completely incomplete.
Oh, Cleveland, the pain. It looked like it was going to be all Denver, and then Cleveland came back, and actually Cleveland gained the momentum, and then DTR gets knocked out. And this dumb shit coach has a quarterback off the bench run a trick play cold in their own zone and just feed Denver the ball at the 20-yard line, and that changed the whole complexion of that game.
Okay, well, I try to stay away from Cleveland games because Cleveland and Indianapolis are 2 teams that we talked about. I don't have completely figured out. I will thank DTR once again for beating his rush total before going out by 1/2 of a yard.
Oh, wow.
He had 21 yards, and then he had to sit the second half. So, boy, that was dangerous. But I will say this, and I discovered this while writing the article last night. Did you know that Cleveland, for all its defensive prowess, they're allowing 30 points a game on the road? Their home road splits are incredible. Are they contender or pretender in terms of when they're on the road, they're a different team? Because the weather, it tends to be worse at Cleveland because they like the dog pound, because the defense comes to play. Something's going on that maybe they're not, maybe like last year when we thought they should have been better defensively. Maybe they're not better defensively. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, there's certainly no Jacksonville, who's 6-0 on the road somehow. I guess we should have mentioned that when we were talking about them. I was surprised to hear that. I thought that they were doing just fine until DTR gets knocked out, and then the coach put him in that situation, and it just it got away from him. But the home road splits are remarkable.
Yeah. Well, what do you want to say about Buffalo? I know it's injuries, but the defense It's just not there.
I've heard a handful of top 10 ratings, and people still have Buffalo like in the 6-7 range.
My power rating has them in the 6-7 range as well.
I certainly don't have them in that range.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mechanical thing. Again, that's why I say power ratings, that's one area, but also matchup analysis. And what happens when you look at Buffalo's matchup analysis, there are certain teams that are going to take advantage of their defensive shortcomings. That's where the power ratings can be overcome. If the matchup analysis says that Buffalo's opponents do not have an edge, then their power rating is going to take precedent. In this particular case, I figured Philly would score points on Buffalo because Philly is a complete team. Buffalo has a bye this week. I can't think of that's an enormous need for Buffalo to be off this week to recalibrate what they need to do offensively and defensively.
Well, let's talk more about the Eagles when we talk about this week.
Okay.
I think it's 3 times this season that I have bet a large underdog and said to myself, all right, you're doing okay. It's going to take 4 unanswered touchdowns to beat you. And each time I've thought that to myself, 4 unanswered touchdowns beat me. So the Raiders just pissed me off. It was nice to see the passion Crosby had to come in as hurt as he was. I think he's like one of the 3% that listed doubtful that ended up actually playing in a game. So it really says something about him. And you knew the Raiders wanted to get above 500 there, and they couldn't. So.
Okay, let me talk about that game. I'll address Hector's question. Thoughts on Flacco's situation? If Joe Flacco plays, I will only look the other way. Joe Flacco is used up. Joe Flacco had some wonderful years, and it's interesting. Delaware, just as an aside, Chris, I know you'll love this. Delaware is going to become the 135th team to come into the FCS now. They're jumping up in class like James Madison did and Jacksonville State and so on. I used to follow Delaware in the olden days with Tubby Raymond. I was well aware of Rich Gannon and Joe Flacco and so on. I was a fan of Delaware in the early days, but Joe Flacco's days are behind him. In terms of this game, the Kansas City Vegas, yes, I also had Vegas. We're talking about double digits. We're talking about a line that shouldn't have been that high. They go off to the 14-0 lead. They do miss a field goal. And at that point, when Kansas City made it 14-7, I thought, I wasn't thinking loss. I don't want to be pessimistic, but I was thinking, somehow this game is going to Kansas City is going to score late, and it's going to be 31-21, and I'm going to get a push out of the game, and I'm going to move on from the Raiders. Well, we didn't even get the push on the game. I think the interim coach bump lasted as long as it could, and then talent won out. I applaud Vegas for trying as hard as they could. I think the line, I'm satisfied with my play. It didn't win. It wasn't I didn't have any strong convictions this past week. I think we're on the right side, and it just didn't work out.
I think what hurt the Raiders the most was getting that 14-0 lead because they woke up the sleeping giant. I think if they would have just if the game had been closer, there wouldn't have been the same urgency, and the offense wouldn't have kicked it up a gear as efficiently as they did.
They did something. Kansas City did something that I think I would have asked them to do several weeks before. Instead of going to Justin Watson, they went to the rookie Rashee Rice, who I think is an outstanding rookie. And I said in the draft analysis, this was tailor-made to have him go play with a guy he caught passes with to prep for the draft, Pat Mahomes. They went to Rice. Rice had over 100 yards. Justin Watson had 3 yards, I believe, receiving. The pecking order is starting to come to fruition in Kansas City. And the Raiders, they don't stop the run that well. They don't stop the pass that well. So ultimately Mahomes was going to wake up at some point in the game. And it just happened that they were able to win by margin in a game that certainly could have been 7 to 10 points.
We've said it repetitively over and over. Why does John Harbaugh get such a free pass? You know, the Twitter timelines are just filled with rants and raves on all the bad coaching. And this guy, on a regular basis, does nothing but foul up in game. And I didn't watch half the game, but I noticed he didn't challenge the fourth down spot in the second quarter that certainly had a chance of, you know, being ruled a first down. The announcers basically were surprised also. How the hell Herbert had a chance for a Hail Mary before the half went to the half, I don't understand. And how you have Flowers not trained to lay down at the 3-yard line. I mean, I'm happy he did because that was great for me as a Baltimore backer. But why is he not sitting at the 3-yard line? Why is he putting his injured team in a position to have to play more defensive plays and not just kneel out the game? But it's every single game. It's the huge blown leads. You knew it. You knew midway to early in the third quarter that the Chargers were going to be in a position to win that game. And they were. And it's the same way with this Baltimore far too often.
Well, how many times have we said take Baltimore in the first half, take the opposition in the second half? We've said it almost every single week. We didn't say it against Detroit because the lead was too much. It was already 21-24 and stuff like that. So I had 9.5 and 10 in the Baltimore game. So that Flowers, the second half cost me because he didn't go down. Or they didn't just get the first down and so on. He's a rookie, I'll give him that. But the fact that Baltimore puts itself in position to basically take the pedal off the metal, I think we all knew the game was going to be closer than 10 once the middle of the third quarter came up and that the Chargers were going to make it a game. And the Chargers typically make everything a game. I mean, the Chargers, they don't usually lose by a lot. They just find ways to lose because they have their own set of problems, as we know. Obviously, this game should have been a Baltimore win, but not a win by 10 points. But John Harbaugh is sitting on a dynamite team. And if they can somehow avoid injuries the last month of the season, they found a second running back to go with Edwards, a really fast running back out of East Carolina. Zay Flowers is doing fine. They'll manage Beckham's time. They'll manage Bateman's time. Isaiah Lively is going to do as much as he can to make up for the loss of tight end Andrews. They'll try to keep Stanley healthy at left tackle. Their linebackers are incredible. Hamilton is starting to really see the field a lot better at safety. This is a very complete team that most coaches, it would be like putting Barry Switzer with Dallas. Remember when that happened?
Yeah.
Maybe you were too young. Where they just said anybody could win with the Cowboys, and anybody did win with the Cowboys. Well, almost anybody could win with the Ravens as long as Lamar Jackson stays healthy, because this is a really, really complete team.
Well, I think this is one of the odd times where a team is winning. How many have they? Last 5, they're 4-1. Where their things are winning, but they're going on the break, and I think it's a good time for them because they were dinged up, and it just feels like a good buy for them.
Yeah, they played one game in a 23 or 29 game stretch or something. They're going to be one of the fresher teams coming down the stretch, whereas Kansas City will not be one of the fresher teams coming down the stretch. So we'll see how that plays out.
The Bears looked pretty darn good last night, and Minnesota didn't look very good last night.
You have low expectations. The Bears did look good, and they didn't score a touchdown.
Well, another defense, I meant to say. The defense did a good job, and I think Colin Cowherd this morning said it's very clear that Fields isn't the quarterback. explosive and as fun as he is to watch, they don't let him throw the ball deep. They don't let him throw the ball down the middle. They obviously don't trust him yet. Do you see it that way? Do you think they absolutely do we talk about this last week where we're trying to figure out whether they would, maybe stick with them and draft later? Oh, no, we were talking about what's his name in Green Bay. That's right.
Jordan Love. Yeah. Well, I think this is going to be one of the top 2 or 3 storylines for next week or for next season coming into the draft. What do the Bears do? Because they are most likely going to have the number 1 pick in the draft because it's Carolina's pick and they own Carolina's pick. So they have their choice. Do we go after Marvin Harrison, a wide receiver, to be the number 1 overall pick? Or do they go after whoever the flavor of the day is for a pass rusher? Or do they have their pick of the litter at quarterback? And it's going to be an interesting decision. What's Justin Fields going to be worth on the open market? Because they would have to trade him. Well, everybody would lowball Justin Fields in a trade.
Well, Atlanta could use him for a 2nd-round draft pick, and the Bears would be happy with that.
I think that's a good deal. I think you just hit the nail. I mean, that would be a real good deal. Atlanta is most likely going to be taking a quarterback one way, shape, or form through free agency. Another stop for Jimmy G or something like that.
He'd fit pretty well there on the turf in a dome environment. And, the Bears could actually set themselves up nicely by trading down, keeping their 1st-round pick, trading down and getting another one for next year or more picks for the following year. What do you think?
Don't have to do that. They already have more picks for the following year because the bounty, you take the number 1 pick and you run with it. And their counterparts, speaking of quarterbacks, what happens to Kirk Cousins after the year? Because he's not going to want a lowball offer. He's always been about, I'm going to play under a 1-year contract and I'm going to take the most money I can. Does he end up staying in Minnesota? Does Minnesota end up paying him because they see this Joshua Dobbs thing isn't working out quite to their liking? Or does he go to another team? We've got so many quarterbacks. We started the show saying that the drop-off in starting quarterbacks is enormous. We've got a lot of quarterback decisions that we can hit at another time. Rams plus 265 to make the playoffs. Probably decent value.
Let's see. I guess we're done with last week. Any other comments from last week?
None at all. Let's move on. 13 games this week.
Are we going to see any life from Seattle the rest of the season? I mean, you already mentioned that they're all dinged up and stuff, but it just seems like their schedule ahead is daunting. I mean, do you think Dallas goes in and rolls them, or do you think Seattle actually has anything left in the tank?
This will be, both teams played last Thursday, so it's a full week off for them. And following this week, Seattle's going to have the 10 days off. So I think you will see a refreshed Seattle after this game against Dallas. I'm not ruling Seattle out of the playoffs at all. Because they have enough coaching, they have enough talent. Walker got dinged up. He's missed some time. The offensive line's not that healthy. They need to get people back in the secondary. So you're right. They're not at full strength. So I think you're going to see a good last 4 games out of them. I don't know about this Dallas game because Dallas seems to be rolling on all cylinders. I think it would behoove Seattle to get out and start fast in this game because Dallas tends to steamroll opponents when they get out to early leads. Dallas is one of those teams that understands how to play with a lead right now. But if you can get Dallas in a contested situation, then Metrics Mike McCarthy gets a little bit strange in terms of the play calling and stuff like that. Off the top of my head, I'd say the first quarter in the Seattle-Dallas game will be very important.
I tweeted this out before the Sunday games, but Dallas has 8 wins. Going into this weekend, They had 0 wins versus 500 or better teams. They had no wins versus teams that were 1 game under 500. They had 3 wins against teams 2 games under 500, 0 against 3 under, 1 against 4 under, 2 against 5 under, and 1 against 6 under 500. So their metrics are extremely strong and they rate very high, and they're blowing out these teams, and they play who's on the schedule. We know that, and they're destroying these teams on the schedule. So it's just an odd scenario there.
The 2 areas where I see in my metric analysis that are meaningful all fall on Geno Smith. He's going to get pass rushed in this game because that's an edge for Dallas. And he's going to have to be more precise with his throws because Dallas is one of those teams that allows top 3 in lowest completion percentage allowed. So the combination of getting pass rushed and then having Geno Smith be able to thread the needle and hit targets, this game is all about how Geno Smith performs.
Yeah, I agree. Boy, when you look at the Chargers laying 6 on the road, it looks so bad. It looks just so easy to pull the trigger on those Patriots, no matter what the situation. Can the Chargers win a game by more than 3?
Well, I think the simplest way to approach this game is I have nothing to say on
it. My metrics do not support playing the Patriots. I'll just leave it at that, even with that large number. Well, I did want to make a comment on Seattle, Dallas. Some sharp books moved back down to 8.5 on Dallas, which I thought was kind of strange. Well, when Circa does it, it's not as important because they've got horrible teaser prices. And the other books have to kind of protect themselves against the teasers. But just an odd thing. You don't really – I kind of thought that might go higher.
Yeah.
Lions and the Saints. We already talked about the Lions. We already talked about the Saints. I don't know what's going to happen here. The Lions say the same thing I've said the last couple of weeks. The Lions should win, but
wouldn't be surprised if the game was a 3-point game. I would never lay points in this matchup.
Yeah, this could be a goofy game for sure. The Saints are desperate in a desperate situation, and the Lions have a 2.5 game lead. So, and they're out of this number 1 seed thing.
Yeah.
But, Campbell mentioned that they're perfectly aware of the criticisms that they're getting and his foul ups. And he says that's going to drive them even harder. We'll see.
Well, you got a scintillating game next, Atlanta and the Jets, and it's a very important game for Atlanta. I know it's cross conference, but every game matters for Atlanta, for New Orleans, and for Tampa Bay. So what's the motivation for the Jets? How do you see them matching up?
You know what? I think I for some reason, I'm not questioning their motivation because I think they take so much shit that I believe that, and it's not like I've seen them quit. There's still remote hope if by some miracle they were going to, they don't really have a playoff shot, but I just don't think in that city that they want to just continue to be losers. I think they're still trying, and I think that they would, especially at home. I mean, who the hell is Atlanta to be laying 3 to anybody on the road, frankly?
Yeah. Yeah, the matchup that hurts the Jets the most in most cases is the fact that their offensive line is so substandard. They're blocking for a no-name quarterback that they get in so much trouble, but that's not Atlanta's strength. It's never been Atlanta's strength. So that negates an edge for Atlanta. My biggest dilemma is, do I bite? If I don't know what the current odds are. I didn't look today. I knew it was about 2.5 yesterday. If the line gets to 3, my biggest dilemma is, do I hold my nose and take the Jets?
I think you need one of those hazmat suits.
Yeah.
Uh, right after we started, the line moved back down to 2.5. You can still find a couple of threes juiced, but there were some flat threes out there for a little bit. So
Yeah.
somebody's playing the Jets.
Well, every time it hits 3, maybe it gets a soft landing because somebody's looking at the number. But I am not power rating the Jets this week. I need more data, so I can't use that as part of my analysis. The matchup analysis doesn't really favor anybody. I don't have any situational things going on. Normally, when all that is in alignment, I either take +3 or pass. I just, if I miss the 3, I don't care. It's going to be one of those Sunday decisions, I feel.
So who the hell is Atlanta to lay 3? Isn't a situational?
Yeah, well, it pretty much is a situational. But the question is, I mean, if I had to, I have a circled power rating with the Jets, and I probably have them around 30th in the NFL, maybe 31st. It's just, how many bad teams do you want to take?
Yeah, it sucks to take bad teams. I lost my place. Arizona and Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
That's
the
a
only
lot of
question
points.
I have in this game is temperature wise. Typically, Arizona does not want to play in December weather. They're not built for December weather and so on. Except for that, I have a hard pass on the game.
Is it supposed to be cold?
No, I haven't even checked. It's Tuesday. You never know. Pittsburgh weather can change every once in a while. The winds sometimes kick up.
Do you? Pittsburgh still had their problems last week in the red zone, even though they moved the ball. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, they settled for field goals. Arizona is a softer opponent. They can, like we talked about when we did the autopsy for last week, Arizona just doesn't have enough players defensively, and teams can make adjustments. And without Matt Canada as offensive coordinator, Pittsburgh is more likely to have an aggressive game plan against Arizona. Uh, the issue for Pittsburgh is, maybe Kyler Murray does something because he's a mobile quarterback. He has that playground mentality. Maybe he draws up a play in the sand that gets them a 35-yard touchdown or something like that. That would be more my concern than Pittsburgh offensively in this matchup. But I just don't want to run away points, and I just don't think Arizona has enough talent that I want to back them either. I think there's a lot of easy passes on this particular card for Week 13.
I was speaking to somebody in Ohio this morning, and they mentioned over a foot of snow is expected in the area. I didn't hear exactly what day that's going through, but Ohio is near Pittsburgh.
I will talk to my sources in Pittsburgh, namely my daughter, and see what's up before Sunday.
So I don't think you'll be laying 5.5 with Pittsburgh, right?
No.
Uh, ugh. Tampa Bay and Carolina. What a game. Ugh. Woo.
So this is the same situation I mentioned, and I don't know if you agree or disagree. I don't know if our listeners will agree or disagree, but I just don't see the interim coach bump for Carolina right now. I think there's too much internally and externally going on. Not that Frank Wright was anything special. We knew he wasn't really. But and again, so if you think there's no new coach bump, are you running to play a Tampa team that kind of plays gritty, linebacker mentality football? Are you really going to lay 5.5 points? It's another pass.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. It's some interesting matchups. I think this is going to be the lightest play I have all year. the Colts. I think we came to the conclusion that this downward movement this morning on Tennessee might be unwarranted. I actually got Indianapolis plus 1.5 about a half an hour before we went on.
So right now, with the news, Indianapolis has become the dog.
Well, no, there's one shop that they moved back down to 1, but I was able to get the 1.5 they had there for like 20 minutes. I got right before that, I got the plus 2.5 on Indianapolis, or on Tennessee, and then I took Indianapolis plus the 1.5, all in a matter of a minute or two.
It's interesting because we talked about there were 10 divisional matchups last week. I think there's 2 this week, and this is one of them. So I have a lot of data on Indy, Tennessee. That's the good news. The bad news is the data is completely inconclusive, and I can't use it because it really predicts a 50-50 spread game. So I can only go by my power ratings. I don't have any situationals. The matchup analysis, I'm looking at the matchup analysis, and that's pretty back and forth as well. There's not a lot of stuff going on in this game unless Indianapolis is the dog, and then you have a little bit of power rating edge for Indianapolis.
Well, Tennessee's definitely out of it. Indianapolis is right in the thick of the playoff race. They're in the playoffs now, aren't they?
Indianapolis, based on schedule, is clearly a playoff contender.
They're the 7 seed.
What might be interesting, and this is looking far down the line, is that Indy-Houston week 18, the final week, that might be a play-in game. Indy-Houston, depending on what Houston does the rest of the year.
Yeah, that is going to be interesting. And the Broncos are tied with them.
Yeah, I see the Broncos. Well, we'll get to the Broncos. In fact, how about this? Indy, Tennessee, big game. In a couple minutes, we'll talk Denver, Houston. Huge game.
That is a huge game.
Between 2 teams that are really average, but huge game nevertheless. In fact, if you want to skip Miami, Washington, I'm not opposed.
I've got a whole 12, 13 minute thing I want to talk about on this game.
Okay. I'll go offline and let you talk.
It's critical information.
No. Yeah. All right. Wait. Where's my pen?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
All right. Let's go to Denver, and the Texans. Well, go ahead. You're on a roll. Go ahead.
Okay. I see Denver as a pretender, and I wrote about this. I think despite the fact they won 5 games in a row, and despite the fact that Sean Payton is doing absolutely wonderful things with Russell Wilson, keeping him out of harm's way, not having him throw into coverage, throwing these 5-yard passes, and so on and so forth. Denver's in the 5-game winning streak, and this will be interesting for you to check as well. Parts of Denver's defense, they have not improved. Basically, they cannot get off the field against the run, regardless of whether it's week 2 or week 12. So I think time of possession in the right circumstances is still going to be a pain in Denver's behind. And because Sean Payton doesn't want to put Russell Wilson in uncomfortable situations, you're going to have a lot of games that come down to the wire. If Houston wins this game, I think week 18 is going to be important for them. If Houston loses this game, I actually think Denver and Houston, as much as Denver is going to be trying, we know Denver's going to be trying, we know Houston's going to be trying, but I actually think if Houston loses this game, both teams will miss the playoffs. Just something to think about.
You didn't mention something I thought for sure, because you charted, is the turnover situation. Denver has been the recipients of an inordinate amount of turnovers that are putting them in great field position, and they're not even taking advantage of it. So they're due for that turnover regression. And when that happens, if they weren't able to take advantage of it when they were getting the turnovers, what's going to happen? So that's something that could be in the Texans' favor.
Yeah, I didn't want to stop people from reading the article, but I did mention that I think Denver's plus 13 in turnover ratio the last 5 weeks of the year. So that was a very important point. And that's avoiding turnovers is why they're winning. It's simply they don't have a good enough team to win other than avoiding turnovers. So that's pretty much what we're doing. Chris Hunter makes a comment. He says, could care less about the Texans, but man, they are fun to watch. They are a lot of fun to watch. I would agree.
He did the same thing that I used to do, meaning couldn't care less. I would always say could care less, and I was really
Okay.
saying the opposite. So I'm guilty of that same thing. That's going to be an interesting game. The obviously that line was opened at 3, was teetering at 2.5, toward 2.5. There were some strong 2.5s in the market, but just a couple. And somebody pulled the trigger without seeing what would happen. But I think 3.5 looks mighty enticing to the average bettor. I don't know whether this line should hold 3.5. What do you think?
I think it's probably going to end up with 3 juiced. Once everybody gets to the window, come to Sunday. To be honest, my power ratings do not support even Houston -3. The eye test supports Houston in this game for the very reason we're talking about, turnovers and so on and all that other stuff. But my power ratings support Denver +3 or 3.5.
Well, I know that if you wipe out the first 3 weeks of Denver, you have a completely different picture of what that team is. So
Yeah.
you
But
can't
some
really look
stats
at.
are still lagging behind for Denver. It's a fascinating game, probably one that I wouldn't trust either team.
You're probably right. You know what? I want to trust the Broncos. It kind of makes the Texans. You see, both of these teams are kind of play on teams again. It's kind of goofy. Plus 3.5 looks so good, and -3 looks not bad. It looks good from both sides.
I understand why you'd want to trust Denver, especially with the power ratings, and especially with Houston. We talked about Stroud, possibly, there'll be a rookie wall hit and stuff like that. But, what opposition does Denver's defense really give to Houston? That's my problem. Can Houston control the line of scrimmage? And according to my matchup analysis, they have a chance to control the line of scrimmage on the offense.
49ers Eagles. Revenge from the game they knocked out Purdy, and they had to pull the bus driver to be the quarterback in the playoffs. Johnson, I think his name was. I believe over the last 4 games, the Eagles have trailed at the half. They have been outgained an average of 100 yards per game. But Hurts has brought them from behind for victories each time. I think Buffalo played the better game. They just fouled it up, a couple of botched field goals, and just ugly. I really wish Buffalo would have won that game by 3. It would have been a nice windfall, but they still covered the teaser legs. How much better are the 49ers?
Yeah, the line is correct. Here's a stat. If you like Philly, here's a stat that you should, or a thought that you should have. What happens if San Francisco doesn't score on their first possession like they do every game? I mean, the way they script the first 15 and 20 plays is unparalleled in the NFL. What happens if San Francisco actually is losing 3-0 in this game and they have to punt on their first possession? Does that change the dynamic at all? Even though there's just so many weapons for San Francisco. I just think It's a fascinating game to handicap. I would really like to take San Francisco for a variety of reasons. I might, but there's one situation that I'm not going to detail that greatly favors Philly.
Well, you don't have to do it in detail. Can you make it fuzzy?
Yeah, cloudy up the situation. But, the matchup analysis, when I look at the stat sheet and so on, San Francisco is one of those teams that has that large turnover ratio, plus 11, I believe. And it's not necessarily regression to the mean with San Francisco because they do a lot of things right. Can you count on them getting an extra turnover in this game? Not necessarily, but you don't think it's going to fall off the map, that they're going to suddenly be -2 in turnovers if they stay healthy. I think you're going to see a lot of Deebo Samuel in this game. I think you're going to see some over-the-top attempts with Brandon Ayuk. I think it's a fascinating game from a strategy standpoint, from a proposition standpoint. I really want to get into what I think will be the player usage for this game. Maybe we'll do that on Friday with Ted. Haven't had time to even think about that right now. Are you leaning one way or another at this point? Have you done anything that you want to share?
I played San Francisco on the money line.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to like San Francisco. I just want to do a little bit more work on it. And I think they'll be public. I think they'll be public in this game for a variety of reasons. So I understand you playing it early.
Yeah, it's just been a brutal stretch for Philadelphia, and they're San Francisco's got the extra rest on top of it, right? Yeah.
Yes, they do. So their game plan is obviously, I mean, they probably charted every snap that Philly's had for the last 20 weeks, counting last year. So they're going to have a game plan in place. They have to go to Philly. We'll see what happens. They can win it, Phil. No question.
So not only do they have the extra rest, but Philadelphia is coming off of overtime. And I believe that they've had more than 2 games with where the defense has had 90 snaps. I've heard some people talking about that as well. So you're not only talking about 4 or 5 games in a row against very difficult competition. You're talking about that defense has been on the field, most of the game against these teams.
The offense, the weakness, quote unquote, that I see on San Francisco would be their pass defense. They don't have a lot of great bodies. They are now down 2 players in the secondary that it's a 10-day rest. It may be 2, it may be 1. We don't know how many they're going to be down. Adding Chase Young was absolutely huge for San Francisco because what's the best way to mask defensive secondary problems? Rush the quarterback relentlessly. So if they contain Jalen Hurts, this is going to be a one-sided game. The big question is if Jalen Hurts escapes the pocket, there are going to be mismatches with Smith and Brown on the perimeter. That's the game in a nutshell as we're brainstorming out loud right now. Will Jalen Hurts have enough time to exploit their wide receivers against San Francisco's defensive backs?
Should mention Leonard, who's cut by Indianapolis, is visiting Dallas and then has plans to visit Philadelphia later this week. So both of those teams must be desperate for him. I think they would.
Oh, yeah. Philly, you play on a pitch count, so I don't know if Leonard likes that, but he's going to play with a lot of all pros if he ends up there.
I've got to bring a couple of these to the attention. Roger says he's teasing Denver to 9.5. That is one of the worst teaser legs you could ever place. Don't do that again. If you were to do it, you do a 7-point teaser through the 10.5. You don't go to the 9.5. And also, you do not take a 2.5 to a 3.5 in that San Francisco situation. That also is not a good use of a teaser, and you do not want to be teasing that into a total either. So 0 for 3 on those 3 name teaser legs of your choice. I wish you good luck on those, though. But I had to make that statement. Let's see. We've got 1 game left. Oh, 2 games left. Oh, 3 games left. Jeez, it's a schedule that never ends.
Yeah. We went long today. What's the current line you have on Cleveland Rams?
Too many. 5.5.
Yeah. So the question is, who's going to quarterback and how much is the drop off worth? But there is no drop off. It's just a different style quarterback. PJ Walker is a problem. I don't think he'd be that turnover prone against the Rams. DTR would be coming back to the LA area to play since he played at UCLA if he's cleared. Basically, Cleveland's defense is on alert right now. Can they stop Matthew Stafford? We've talked about Cleveland has allowed something like 26 or more points, 24 or more points in every road game. And they have Myles Garrett, who's banged up. Cleveland's on life support injury-wise.
Yeah, they are. Fortunately, the injury to Garrett wasn't as severe as they thought it was going to be. That PJ, he can't quarterback. They're in trouble.
Speaks to the drop-off. Same thing happened when Stafford's out and somebody has to replace him. So it's a quarterback-driven league. Once again, not much interest. If I had an interest in this game, I would actually suck it up and take the Rams.
Ooh, that's not like you. The public, they're betting the Packers. We saw 7.5, and now it's down to a handful of 6s. I think that's as low as that line can go. What do you think?
Yeah. Wow. There's some love for Jordan Love right now. There's some situations that favor Green Bay based on Kansas City off their divisional game, Green Bay having extra rest. There's some things that actually favor Green Bay. I do want to give credit again to Kansas City's defense. I don't know how long we can keep going and undervaluing their defense. Their sack ratio is tremendous. They protect their own quarterback, of course, and they get to opposing quarterbacks even without 2 of their pass rushers. They have a little bit of a weakness versus the run, but that's not a serious flaw in today's NFL. They play the pass extremely well. They're opportunistic. Jordan Love is probably going to commit at least 1 turnover in this game because Kansas City is going to bait them. If you told me, Chris, that the turnover ratio would be flat at the end of this game, I would say Green Bay +7 would be a good bet.
It seems like a lot. It's really an interesting situation. There's a lot of interesting situations. And, last week we had 12 favorites cover. So will the public be more inclined to keep backing the favorites this week, or do they get little sneaky and figure that the dogs are due?
Yeah, well, you and I, we would say it's 1 game at a time. The fact that there were 12 favorites is really meaningless to me, unless it really pushes the line some particular way. But I don't think a 1-week sample size should even be considered in that way. People will look at the matchups, they'll look at the quarterbacks, they'll bet with their heart, or they'll bet, or if they do this for a living, they're going to bet based on metrics. They're not going to worry about that 12 favorites won last week.
And last but not least, the Bungles versus the Jaguars.
Well, we just talked about favorites. I have to say this. Yeah. In retrospect, going 2 wins and 3 losses last week for me in a week dominated by favorites was pretty good because, like I said, 3 to 4, whatever. But if you look at some of the games this week, particularly this Monday night game where Jacksonville is having their first Monday night home game since 2011. Cincinnati is banged up. There's a lot of situations. There's a lot of reasons to like Jacksonville. And boy, I can't get in the way of that. I don't tease, you know that. I came close with that Detroit Monday night game when I remember that Monday night game Detroit played
No,
when there
you
was no
teased
way
us
they
about
could
this.
lose.
You teased us about this Philadelphia trend you didn't want to talk about. So don't
No.
tell me you don't tease.
If I had to tease, Jacksonville would be the team I would tease.
Yeah, I think that looks pretty good, actually, myself.
It's like the Detroit Monday night game of about 5 weeks ago. If you think, and this is what I thought, that Detroit had a minimum 90% chance to win the game, obviously it's in a good teaser range. I think pretty close to that with Jacksonville. I don't see how, if they played 100 times, that Jacksonville would lose more than 12 times or something like that. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think one of the angles to look at this week is the old money line parlay route. If you like some of these favorites, just a reminder: if you're a teaser person, you're not looking to tease the Chargers down. You're not looking to tease the Chiefs down. Those are not good teaser legs because the money lines are the better bargain. Once you get to minus 280, and you can find both of those at less than minus 280.
So my cautionary tale would be, again, use Detroit Green Bay from last week. If you really think that it's going to be a tussle, you're worried about Detroit's defense, you're worried about this and that, and you need to tease them to a certain number, why aren't you looking at Green Bay? Because if you're worried about that, why wouldn't you take the 8.5, 9 points in Green Bay? That's really the side. Go to the straight bet option. And then I want to flip that. You shouldn't. I don't have that same feeling like I had Green Bay that I had with Cincinnati. The reason to tease Jacksonville in this case would be because there's a disparity between these two teams. There's a matchup analysis. There's situational analysis. There's quarterback issues with Cincinnati. This isn't the same to me as Green Bay, Detroit. I think Cincinnati is in trouble the rest of this season. And Monday night just might highlight that. Maybe I'll be wrong, but Jesse Bates scored a defensive touchdown last week, a great defensive touchdown. He was on Cincinnati last year. He's not on Cincinnati saving the day for them this year. Joe Mixon ran 2 yards a carry last week. There's no backup there. Mixon is the only running back they have. Jake Browning may be the only quarterback they have right now, that they're looking at. T. Higgins isn't playing, that much these days. Maybe he plays, but he's going to play hurt. What's there to like about Cincinnati? In this case, I wouldn't look at the dog.
I like their uniforms.
Okay, their uniforms are sharp. Let's change everything I said.
The question on the unders, we've talked about that. Do you have anything to add other than there are a lot of unqualified quarterbacks that are keeping the scores low?
Unders for this week, is that the question?
No, just for the entire season.
Oh, I think it's a reaction to the defenses making offenses go down the field, Mahomes style, bit by bit. Remember how teams used to play Mahomes and Mahomes used to beat them over the top? Now they made Mahomes go down the field. They're making every team go down the field. I think it's a strategy decision based on what's going on in terms of how defenses are played. If you think there are more penalties, the clock runs after penalties unless there's been an incomplete pass. So that shortens the game a little bit. Maybe there's a little bit of that in there. The quarterback play, like you mentioned, yeah, there's some bad quarterbacks, so they're doing some different things there. Sacks are up. Interior pass rushes are happening more often than not. When sacks happen, the clocks run after that as opposed to an incomplete pass. So there's a few situations that are going on. Interestingly enough, the weather's been pretty decent this year compared to other years. So weather's not a factor. And wind, to my knowledge, Cris, hasn't been as much of a factor. So it's really situationally that we're seeing more unders. Don't be surprised if we see a lot more overs when it comes playoff time.
Hey, I know you chart the snap counts. What about have you noticed a change in the overall number of plays being run in these games?
I charted it for team, not necessarily, and I charted it for number of pass plays versus number of run plays. It's a good question. I haven't got into as much detail in terms of if snaps have been down. But you look at teams that snap the ball closer, like Denver is a team that traditionally snaps the ball near the end of the play clock. So you get fewer plays out of that particular game. So I haven't charted it as a league-wide thing.
Yeah, it does. I don't know. It's strange because it seems like I see it both ways. It seems like some of these games have long drives, and then some of these games, a minute is like an eternity to get up down the field. So just strange. There's one other thing. Anything else on your mind this week?
I think we've scratched the surface on these 13 games. It makes me want to go back and do a little bit more work on these. I think they're fascinating games from a matchup standpoint. Hopefully there'll be one or two that really stand out for me as we go along. Some of the critical games. Well, we'll be back on Friday, so maybe we'll touch on a couple of those critical games, get some sound bites, hopefully, from Ted. So we're not done yet.
Yeah, I actually have a handful of games that require more work, so it's not as open and shut. And after having a less than successful week with the model last week, just want to make sure that I dig in deeper this week.
Yeah, I think you want to look. We always talk about taking an extra day if you're off a down week or something like that. I think it's important, and not to rush back in or chase or anything like that. But it's important to look at both sides. If you really like one side, what are the arguments for liking the other side? Am I missing something? Are the power ratings off? What's going on? Kind of look at it. Try to look at it neutrally, and then once everything's on the table and once you've considered everything, then go to where you want to go with the game in total.
Yeah, it's if you let the week go by and things just start to percolate and things start to become clear, because when I look at every single week without exception, I look at the schedule ahead. And it looks like Swahili to me, basically, for the most part. And I always say, God, how am I've got like 2 plays on here, and by the end of the week, I've got a toilet roll again. So,
yeah, I don't mind having few plays. I mean, I'd rather consolidate if it's not there. We'll go with a question from Steve Murrin. Rams, Chargers. It lost my screen. There was a Rams, Chargers, Chiefs money line parlay. I will be quite honest with you here. I don't think I'd ever put the Chargers in a money line parlay.
Well, I did. So I'm mainlining, man. I'm mainlining.
I understand it's New England. New England is a sick team. The Chargers should win by 35. I can't do it. I would just look myself in the mirror the next day. You put the Chargers in a money line parlay. What did you do? I don't know. College talk, I think, because we're running really long right now. Maybe we save a little bit about the college. Let's have a segment on Friday for the college championship talk.
Oh, are those this week?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, but I wanted to touch on one thing that you said with, as far as the straight betting goes, and being fearful of the other team. In a lot of cases, I think it's just the parity and the randomness of so many games each week. There's no room for error. There's probably 3 or 4 games every week, or at least 2. Let's just say between 2 and 4 games. You wasted your time handicapping it. It came down to, something completely out of your control that you can't handicap. A referee call, a miracle drop, miracle catch, penalty, whatever. So with that in mind, I encourage myself to elongate my reach of favorable numbers as often as I can. I don't feel any security betting straight bets oftentimes. That's
last week we saw 4 unusually low NFL totals. Speaking of the lack of offense this year. So I understand the philosophy. Again, you got to pick what works for you. You're not, and you've said this so many times, Chris, don't take teasers just for the sake of taking teasers.
Absolutely.
You have to like that team, because if you really like Detroit, okay, you're taking them in teases. But if you're just looking to say, oh, they're going to win the game and you have no data to prove it, please don't do that, because you got to match it up with 1 or 2 other teams. But with low totals last week, it did make it kind of teaser paradise for those who like teases, because you're dealing with 33 points, 35 points. I mean, there were some low totals this week. So it's going to take defensive scores to get it out of the teaser range when you do that. The NFL for years, 2020, 2021, even a little bit last year, they were out of teaser range, in my opinion, especially 6-point teaser range, because scoring was up in the NFL. Tease prices were up where you're laying 120, 130 and stuff like that. You were killing yourselves if you're betting teases thinking that 6 points matter in a 47-point spread, 50-point spread, 53-point total game. But this year has been a correction with the scoring, and that's helped teases. I will say that.
Well, we have a 34, we have a 37, we have a 39. So more we've got a 39 and a half, 40. So we've got more low totals this week.
Yeah, it's amazing to see what happened. I kind of, we'll talk about it later. We could close, but in the playoffs, don't be surprised if we see higher scoring games.
I'll leave you with this. It's a fallacy that the higher scoring games are necessarily worse to tease than the lower scoring games.
Roger said the same, but
no, he
you
said
have to be.
He said
the tighter the numbers, the more likely the teases. Okay, yeah, I understand what you're saying, Chris, but you really have to pick your spots. You have to know. You have to do matchup analysis to find that.
I agree 100%. There's all the stuff. Absolutely, I want to repeat what you said. You don't just tease because there's a Wong teaser available to be had. You don't tease games just for the hell of it. You better have a rhyme or a reason. Just because a Wong is available, there's lots of Wongs that lose. So just look back to last week. So
that's all I got. I'll see you on Friday. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll be back. Same bet channel, same bet time, 12 o'clock on Friday. So good luck to everybody until then.